Good evening, everyone. I'm your host, Jason Miles, here for another episode of This is Revolution Podcast. Thank you so much for the I almost said Grand Theft Auto. For the Give Them an Argument crew for allowing me to host the show in Ben's absence. There's a show going on right now on Give Them an Argument. Ben's going to be playing a lot of the footage, not all of it, from the live event we did a few weeks ago in North Hollywood. The book launch for his latest on Everyday Analysis, 4 essays on Palestine. It was a really great time. We had a great Q&A afterwards. Apparently that's not going to be what you see, but you will see the bulk of the show, they say. So check that out. If you're new to the channel, welcome. Glad to have you here. If you like what we're doing, please hit like and subscribe. Past your gesture, that goes a very long way. If you're a returning listener, subscriber, what up? Yeah. Want to say shout out. I don't do this enough. Shout out to the mods, by the way. Sune, Toussaint, still modding, steady mobbing. Appreciate you guys so much in making sure the conversations we have here stay somewhat civil. Also, there's a new feature that we rolled out the last few months. I think August, I rolled it out, called the Crisis Papers. I tried to make it bi-weekly, but issue number 4 is out right now, and it's called One of Us is the Killer, Celebrity Cancel Culture, and the Illusion of Politics in a Neoliberal World. Here is the image of the latest article. It's up right now for patrons. It's nicely formatted to look like a magazine. It takes hours to do, so I really hope you guys dig it and check it out. If you are a patron of the show at the Teenage Anarchist level or higher, that is free for you. You can just get it in the store. If you're not a patron and don't want to be, but want to check it out anyway, definitely you can. Wherever you are watching or listening to this show, there's links in the description to the Crisis Papers. Also, when people ask, where can I read Pascal Robert? Where can I read that article? Again, wherever you watch or listen to the show, there's links in the description to all of Pascal's work, Black Agenda Report, all my stuff with Sublation, my stuff with Damage. It's all right there. So now we got that out of the way. Let's get to the topic at hand, which is this election. Are you guys fired up for the election? Have you guys voted? Are you mail-in people? Are you vote in person people? Are you read the news, follow the news people? Who do you have in this election? I want to know. As election day approaches, many of us are bracing ourselves for what the next 4 years could bring. Whether you're planning to vote for one of the establishment parties or opting for a third-party candidate, it's crucial to remember that casting a ballot remains a personal act, not a revolutionary one. For the past few election cycles, we've been told that each one is the most important election of our lifetime. Yet beyond this reoccurring narrative and the escalating culture wars, everyday politics remain largely a popularity contest, how to reach for the majority even among those who consume independent media. Ironically, much of today's independent left media is starting to resemble the very cable news it once criticized, increasingly focused on personality-driven gossip and polarized attacks. This bipartisan tendency to conflate the personal with the political has deepened, shaping how media across the spectrum addresses pressing issues. In that spirit, we here with the TIR crew want to dig deep into the potential consequences of this election, not simply from a partisan perspective, but from a critical left perspective on power and policy. What might a second Trump presidency mean for the state of the U.S. and the world? How might a Kamala Harris administration address or fail to address key issues like the growing far-right movement, the escalating Russia-Ukraine conflict, and the Israel-Palestine crisis? If Americans vote for the status quo, How much further right has the status quo shifted? And if complacency sets in, could we see a far right agenda brewing in the background with greater ideological coherence than before? These are complicated questions. And while we may not have all the answers, we're here to tackle them head on. And I will be doing that with my co-host, my homie, my dog. He is the man of the Mau Mau Hour. He is the Pascal Robert.
Peace and greetings to the chat. Peace and greetings to the audience. Peace and greetings, Jason Miles.
What's up, man? You feeling good?
Yes.
Uh-oh, did you have pre-workout again? Just a warning, Pascal has had pre-workout. Also coming all the way live from the great state of Utah. I hope it's not snowing. Please welcome Derek Vaughn.
Hello.
What up? What up, Mr. Clean Shaven?
Yeah,
I just want to advertise that Derek Vaughn was an excellent guest on my last Mau Mau Hour. Please go check it out. We had some phenomenal conversation.
Yeah.
You had good comments too. There wasn't any hate comments. So take that, Derek.
Yeah. That's a rarity when I open my mouth. I'm clean shaven and I guess I'm in good spirits. I have to be honest. This is the election that everyone else is losing their goddamn mind about, and I have such a fatalistic attitude that I'm actually at peace with no matter what happens, because I'm like, it's all bad.
I'm with you, Pascal. Are you in that same kind of boat as Varn, where you're kind of in almost a Zen-like feeling, where you're like, eh?
I actually am. What part of that is actually because of the conversation that Varn and I had on the last show in terms of what this election really means and doesn't mean in terms of geopolitics, which we're going to get into when we get to the meat and potatoes. But there's a lot more smoke and mirrors than actual substance when you come to this election that people really, really, really want to admit. And what became transparently obvious as a result of the vice presidential debate is that these two candidates are scarily closer together in more ways than a lot of people want to admit.
Oh,
that ain't just on foreign policy.
What's so interesting about what you just said, Pascal? So I went to go see my son recently. Actually, the night you guys did the Mau Mau, I was getting ready to take off. Drove up north. Same thing happens to me every time. Phone battery's dying. Listen to the right-wing radio. I'm listening to this right-winger just lie. Change the station, because this is all it is, right? I don't know if it's like this by you guys. Probably not. It's two or three right-wing stations, right-wing Jesus in Spanish, and then like that's all it is, right? And so I'm if you can get anything at all. And so I'm listening to these guys just go off on communist Kamala Harris, this leftist plan. And I was having a conversation with a buddy that lives around here, and he kept conflating the Democratic Party with leftists. And actually, if you listen to the live thing with me, Ben, and Anna Kasparian, there's a moment where Anna says something about the left, and she's referring to the Democratic Party, and I stop her, and I was like, you can't refer to the Democratic Party as the left.
No.
That's still a thing for a lot of people, that this idea of the Democratic and Republican parties is that they are right and left. We usually say on this show, like, maybe it's the left flank of capital at best. I don't even know if it's that anymore, because I do feel like the center, that the centrist that we used to say is pretty hardcore conservative. Most of these people are extremely tough on crime. They're extremely tough on immigration. And that's the only thing these people are talking about, really. Because like you said, foreign policy is pretty much off the board because they both agree so much on it. So I'm sure you guys get into political conversations here and there. It's an election year. People know what you guys do for a living. Or at least
Do they?
do, seriously. And well, you know, people know. I feel very comfortable, diddly diddly dee, that people around you know that you have an opinion politically. They may not know exactly where you sit. I feel that same way about you, Pascal. I feel very comfortable. People know, like, oh, if I have a political question, I can ask these guys. Do you see that same conflation when you have these non super lefty show conversations, like regular cats in your world or your family? Do they make that same conflation?
I mean, the left of the Democratic Party. I would
Yeah.
say that, like, I live in Utah, right? And I live in Gomorrah in Utah. So
You mean that literally, not figuratively, right?
yeah, I know. I live in Salt Lake City. So I'm in a little weird kind of purple blue island in an extremely red state. I mean, we basically have two Republican parties here. We have a moderate Republican Party and a Ezra Taft Benson Trump hybrid Republican Party, and they're at war with each other constantly. And the Democrats run this city and nothing else.
Gotcha.
So I talk to normies all the time about politics. I hear kids' opinions on it, etc. And I tour the city. When I was in rancher country, I saw a ton of Trump signs. I saw this giant Trump banner painted on the side of the building of when he got shot in the ear. But in the city itself, yeah, I know. In the city itself, there were 3 Kamala Harris signs. Now, I see all kinds of political signs, but not for the presidential race, hardly at all. I saw 2, and the funny, of the Harris signs I saw 2 Republicans for Harris signs and 1 Harrison Walsh sign. None of the liberals here give a shit. My coworkers are all moderates. Some of them are like Joe Biden, Blinken worshipers. Some of them are early George Bush Republicans. And
okay.
a couple are Democrats who voted for Reagan, and that's how old they are too.
Damn.
So when they refer to the left, they mean Nancy Pelosi. And I find that anyone over 30, that's still largely true for, although the more politically informed kind of have a double take about it, where sometimes when they use the word left, they mean the left, as in the annoying people on Twitter, and sometimes they mean the left, as in the Democrats. That's in the under 30 set. And the over 30 set, Democrats are the left still. I mean, we didn't unseat that. And yeah, they know about Bernie Sanders. Yeah, they know about that other stuff, but they still see that as just a flank within the Democratic Party. And are they wrong? I mean, that's the question.
Pascal Robert.
I think that's a fair assessment, because for the large part of what politics has meant in the post-civil rights era in America, the only left that we had was the Democratic Party. Yes, we had socialists. Yes, we had Marxists, communists, and whatnot, but they were all popular front acolytes of the Democratic Party. We had communists for the Democrats when Reagan was running as president. So as a result, what has happened is that there's been a major conflation. I would have hoped that clarification would have been made when Bernie Sanders ran in 2016, but it seems like since the Sanders coterie have done nothing but surrender to the Democratic Party, the clarity that was made with what was called the progressives and the regular Democrats is over now, and that basically everyone sees is the Democrats as the left. And I don't like being conflated with the Democrats. There's nothing left about the Democratic Party. It's a capitalist, corporate, militarist party. You know, its foreign policy is egregious. Its domestic policy is only more mild by slight hairs than the Republicans, particularly since the rise of Clintonian third way politics in the 1990s. So it's it's important for me anyway that we make those distinctions. But I don't know how much that's happening when so much of that left is adhering around the Democratic Party.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you guys a question, and this isn't just to my good friends on the screen. This is also to all of you guys in the chat and comments. I want to see what you guys have to say about this as well. What could a Trump win mean domestically and internationally? In a second term, what shifts could we see in U.S. policy, especially regarding immigration, healthcare, and labor? How might a Trump administration approach foreign policy, particularly regarding conflicts in Ukraine and Israel, Palestine? Would it exacerbate tensions, or would it really aim for a strategic withdrawal? Derek, you want to start off?
Sure, I can start it off. I'm also going to channel good Dr. Cuba here a little bit because I've read his analysis of this election. I am less certain than him on a couple of things, but I mostly agree with it. Domestically, we're going to see part of Project 2025, but not the policy part. The policy part is a bait and switch to get like the wish list of every crank conservative group in the country back on board in this demagogic plan. But Trump realizes it makes the contradictions in his coalition a little bit too obvious. And frankly, some of the economic planks in it are so insane that it would potentially crash the world economy. There's no way, for example, we're going to go back to the gold standard in the first 100 days of the Trump administration. So, and if he did that, I think the military would be in charge very quickly. But I don't think he's going to do that. But I do think we're going to see him use what is his right. This is not an actual change in U.S. law. This is a change in U.S. norm. He's going to put loyalists throughout the most of the administrative apparatus. Now that's less relevant than it even was a few years ago. You're going to see the courts go even further right wing. And the West depends on if the GOP takes the House. Now, the GOP was not looking like it was going to take the House at all until recently. Now it still favors the Democrats by about 2 points. But 2 points is within the margin of error. So if he takes the House, then you might see other things. Like you might see Obamacare repealed and replaced with this plan that J.D. Vance is talking about. Which would make it so pre-existing conditions can be charged for, although you cannot be denied coverage for them. But, that's irrelevant if they can charge for them. And there's a lot of other things that we have to ask ourselves. We would probably see mass deportations. Now, is it going to be this mass deportation that he's talking about? I doubt the state has that capacity, actually. That would require a massive hiring and amp up.
That's a New Deal, right? That's like a New Deal level public works project job situation.
It would be public works, but everyone's a border control agent.
Gross.
So, I mean, like that kind of thing we wouldn't see. I think we'd see a lot of subsidies to green programs and that sort of thing go away. We'd probably see a return to inflation because his tariffs are going to be inflationary. I think almost every economist, heterodox and orthodox, agrees on that, except for Trump himself. So, is it the end of the world, though? I mean, it's hard to say. Dr. Cuba seems to think it'll have much more effect on the deep state than I do, because I just don't know that the state has these kind of prospects left in it. And we've heard these kinds of things said from Trump before. Now, what makes it a little bit different is that there's more coherence in his approach to the state, and he might have more loyalists this time instead of trying to build a coalition out of different factions in the GOP. But we have to remember that the right in America is actually very fragmented right now, even though things are moving more right-wing.
Yes.
The right in America is unified under Trump because Trump's a demagogue. because he says stuff where if you're an isolationist or a war hawk, you can think he's talking to you. This is a gift he's had. This is, this goes back a long time. The only thing that we know he really wants to do is an auto de fe of all the immigrants, which, by the way, is more popular now than it was in 2019.
Yep.
And if we are honest with ourselves, the Biden administration actually are the people who rationalized and established the 2016 to 2020 Trump policy that was actually delivered on by Biden. And now that that's happened, what are the GOP going to do? They're going to move right. Now, on international policy, this is highly divisive on the right. There's a lot of even MAGA people who are Palestinian sympathetic, particularly if they're under 35.
Mm-hmm.
But Trump is likely to tell Netanyahu that all restraints are off. However, we don't know what he's going to do with Iran. An outright war with Iran would probably be a disaster for everybody, and I think even Trump knows that. But Trump also has hostility towards Iran and wants to make allies with the Gulf, so I could see him escalating things with the Houthi and being very willing to fight a proxy war in Lebanon directly. Now, the other thing, the reason why I don't think Trump would want to go with Iran, and I said this on my calculations about holding territory and trying to hold territory in the Persian Gulf, would be that would actually require a massive troop increase, not just a massive military capacity increase. And the only way I can see that happening fast enough is a draft, which I do not think Trump wants to be seen as the president to do. But what he could do is in making concessions to Russia over the Ukraine die down, which I think is going to happen either way. I don't. Dr. Cube and I may not agree on that, but I think the Democrats are also losing their patience for it, and it's clear that they can't win. The Ukrainian forces can't win at this point, but at least not in a conventional war, which they're currently fighting. What that means, however, would be probably different between Harris and Trump. So for Trump, it would probably mean surrendering Crimea, the Donbass, and then maybe even parts of the Kharkiv Oblast and the Kherson Oblast. So even more than what was originally in the Russian line of sight. So you're dealing with more than the separatist republics. What other conditions would be put on Ukraine? I don't know. I don't think anyone else does either. But it would likely be something negotiated to end that conflict. Which, if part of that deal that Trump offers Russia involves isolating Russia's traditional ally in the Middle East, Iran, then that may be on the table. I don't know. As I said on to Pascal on the Mau Mau Hour, Trump's way of handling Iran is actually a lot harder to guess than we know. It's actually a lot more up in the air what he may do, and it's going to depend on what his coalitionary partners really want, and who knows what that is. I mean, it's hard to gather which factions of the GOP are going to be in power. We know what faction's not going to be in power, though, and that is the neoconservative wing under Dick Cheney. They have obviously defected to the Democrats, and it seems to be part of a Democrat strategy that I'll talk about later that I'm not sure is going to work. But a lot of what Trump's going to do in foreign policy, I think it's harder to say because Israel-Iran is more volatile, but we have a pretty good idea of what he's going to do with Ukraine and Russia. And in the case of domestic policy, a lot of it's going to depend on if the Democrats keep the House. I think we can safely say, looking at all the electoral maps, that there's very little chance of the Democrats keeping the Senate. That just the map wasn't good for them in any world because of the weird way we rotate through the Senate. So those things can happen. Will all your friends end up in camps? I doubt it. But you might see anti-protesting laws. You might see foreign agent laws invoked, actually, but specifically on the left. So who knows? I mean, I don't think we entirely know. What I will tell you, though, is if you think they're going to just implement all of Project 2025, you're kind of foolish. That would be so destabilizing to the world that I don't think it would be allowed to stand.
Pascal Robert.
I gotta say, I agree almost totally with Varn and Kuba in those introspects. I think that one thing is absolutely clear is that Trump will use his administration to punish his enemies, political and otherwise, and I think he will be merciless to that effect. I think that he will subvert the rule of law to use lawfare to persecute anyone who's come after him. And I think that he will definitely be vigorous in terms of using the immigration policy to do as much detention and repatriation back to people's homelands as much as possible. That will be allowed by the Koch brothers. So, in terms of foreign policy, it's a little bit more unclear to me. I definitely think that he will try to make peace with the Russians on the Ukraine issue. What Trump buys for the Middle East? Listen, can Trump be more hawkish than the Democrats in the Middle East right now? I mean, I think on the question of Iran, it's possible because he's always been more hawkish than the Democrats on the Iran question. But something tells me there's a possibility that Trump wants to come in as under the guise of being the peacemaker president, basically saying that I can make peace with anyone. Let's make a deal. Let's try to get this done as quick as possible. We got to stop this. This bloodshed is not good for business. So there's part of me that's saying that he actually may be better on the foreign policy tip than a Kamala Harris, who I'm predicting is going to go straight hardcore to the right because of her unity party ticket with the Cheney rightists with the neocons.
I did want to ask that question to you guys. How might a Kamala Harris administration differ in its priorities? What challenges and opportunities could arise in a Harris administration concerning climate policy, economic inequality, and healthcare? In terms of foreign affairs, what might her administration's stance be towards ongoing global conflicts? And would it prioritize diplomacy or align more closely with the current military strategies? And it sounds like, Pascal, you're saying that you think she's going to kind of stay the course.
I think she might move to the right.
And when we say move to the right, in what sense? Do you think she's going to try to slash all HUD programs? Like, what is she going to do?
I mean, internationally, I think that she's going to become a much more. The Cold War between Russia and China will be ramped up in a way in which her hostility towards Russia will be augmented significantly.
Oh boy. See there,
Harris administration. Well, Harris is a cipher. She's basically a more charismatic Lori Lightfoot, and that's not saying much because she's not super charismatic, although she is fairly smart. If we look at their strategies for who's in the Democratic coalition, instead of trying to do the Biden thing where Biden tries to pull in at least some of the white collar allegiance with blue collar organized labor to keep some elements of the blue wall up in the Midwest, Harris seems to think that just appointing Tim Walz, and even if you like Tim Walz, was enough to pacify that. There has been a ton, and I mean a ton, of donations from crypto and other sorts of tech stuff to both campaigns, but to Harris campaign, you've seen this pivoting towards a kind of like entrepreneurial spirit in the Black community. The Democrats are also freaking out about Black men and Latinos not being as loyal. But if I've looked at long-term statistics, and I want to point this out, the Dems want you to think that the world began in 2007, because that interracial coalition that emerged with Obama, they've been banking on it being stable in their means to ascension for a long time. At the same time, they've been relying on elements of the class, of the relatively elite, petite bourgeois and professional classes, to appeal more and more to the only growth demographic that they had in 2020, which is college-educated white men. And there has been some pivot towards blue-collar women, but only over abortion. Now, let me tell you the paradox of that. And we can actually learn this from watching the GOP. When the evangelicals started to decline is actually when they started getting what they wanted. All right? And why would that be the case? Now, some of it's because it went through lawfare and not through the legislature. But the other reason, if you think about it, is if you are promising someone something and you never deliver it, they're a captive base until you deliver it. And as they fade and they're not as big of a base, then delivering what you promise is a way to keep the few that are left loyal. So on margin, it might matter, but you no longer need to bait them in the same way because they're a smaller part of your coalition. We saw that with Trump and the evangelicals. The evangelicals are more loyal to Trump than ever, but the evangelicals are frankly a smaller part of society than ever. All right. I think we're going to see that with abortion. I don't think that the Dems have ever meant to codify Roe v. Wade because it is a motivating factor for them to win elections in purple and red states. And so continuing to promise it and not do anything about it is something that would be very useful to keep their base motivated. And if you're not that cynical, you probably should be. So you're not going to probably see that. You're also probably not going to see them doing as much of, throwing as many bones to pro-life Democrats anymore, but they're still probably not going to give you what you want, because giving you what you want would deactivate you as a voter base. And if they're trying to pull blue-collar women in, and that's all they have, all right, then there you go. Now, clearly they're gearing up to blame the left, Black men, and Muslims on their loss if they do lose. That's clear. I mean, we've already heard stories about even Muslim Democratic politicians being asked to leave Harris events. Like that came out last week. All right. And we're not just talking about what happened with the Palestinian woman at the DNC either. So what do we see there? Well, they know that they have lost a large part of the Muslim vote in America. The last poll I saw on that says about 57% is going to vote for the Green Party, and about 52% is going to vote for the Democrats, and then the rest are probably going to vote for Trump. So they're willing to sacrifice that demographic. I think they're hoping that they can use abortion to get a lot of suburban women out, both blue and white collar, to make up the difference. Which, by the way, with the white collar end of that, there's a good chance that the war appeals are actually part of the program.
Have you guys heard about what's going on with the Iowa polls?
Something happened?
Yeah, for the first time. Don't forget, Trump won both of his bids in Iowa pretty handedly. But there was a poll that was done by a pretty famous female pollster that showed that Kamala Harris was ahead in Iowa by a few points. And what, to Vaughn's point, what caused that ascendancy was that white women were shown to be gravitating towards Kamala Harris on the abortion issue. And then it's not just only young white women, it's also white women over 65.
They made a trade like that Chappelle Show skit, and they traded brown men of a certain age for women, Latino women that usually vote white, and white suburban women.
Yep. So, and why they made that trade, I hate to say, is actually somewhat rational, because women.
Wait, let Pascal say it.
Go ahead.
Women are more loyal to voting constituency.
You know what you want to say, Pascal, because half of them niggas can't vote because they're felons.
I was actually going to be willing to say that in the South, half of that can vote because they're there.
I'd have been very comfortable to say you're a felon.
I just the other thing is the black men voting for Democrats at that level. Now they've always voted for Democrats well, not always. Since the end of Jim Crow, let's put that in there. They have always voted for Democrats in large numbers if they could vote. But the idea that 90% of, or 99% or whatever of the black male vote was going to go to the Democrats is actually an Obama 08 phenomenon, and only an Obama 08
Say it again for the people in the back, Varn. That's an anomaly that they accept to be a norm, and it's not a norm. It's a one-shot deal. Obama was a one-shot anomaly politically that created a coalition that the Democrats, to your point, have been trying to replicate for 4 election cycles. It's not going to work. That dog ain't going to hunt anymore.
Right. And then on the Latin vote, a lot of Latin people do not want to crack down on illegal immigration, about 40% last time I checked. But no one is even trying to push through an immigration reform policy that would benefit anyone and streamline anything. I mean, everyone's pretty much hoping like DACA and some executive fixes will do that. So why would anyone care about that either? And when you look at the parts of the economy that a lot of Latin people are in, which is a lot of petite bourgeois small businesses, because frankly, they didn't have the same roots into municipal employment because of a language barrier. That's changing over time. 2 or 3 generations in, that's different. But 2 or 3 generations in, you're also looking at people voting more of their economic interest anyway. So when you look at that, it actually never made a lot of sense, other than the extreme racial animus that you saw from the GOP after 2006, that the Latin vote would be super loyal in the first place. The one thing I will say that complicates this, there are a few things. The optics of that New York rally for Trump really are bad and did alienate a lot of former Trumpist Latins. So,
especially in Pennsylvania.
Right. So, who knows? Now, when we look at Harris's policies, I mean, basically we're looking at the Biden administration pivoting more right. Waltz is not a particularly right-wing individual, although his stuff on foreign policy seems pretty much identical to everybody's, unfortunately. But I don't know how much influence he's going to have. We have to remember that he seems to be picked partly because he doesn't have a lot of national ambitions beyond this election cycle. So what are we going to see? Well, if our main appeal is to try to peel off the last little bit of college-educated Republicans at the expense of groups that are less likely to vote, either because of felon laws or because of just low historical turnout, then we don't like the Democrats' gambit makes some sense in the short run. It makes no sense in the long run, but no one seems to think the long run matters, because the Democrats' primary arguing point at this point is what exactly? Well, we're not Trump and we'll stop Trump from making things worse. That is their only selling point. And while I'm not going to say it doesn't matter, like that Trump won't do things, like Trump could make things much worse here. It's also unclear to me on the long run, what Harris would do except allow for a whole lot of things to move more rightward at the state level. We've already seen it. The states got more right wing under Biden than under Trump. That's a fact. Like, look at what happened in Florida. Look at what happened in Texas. That the Biden administration emboldened them, and they did nothing really to counter it. Nothing at all. Even when they looked to be breaking the law, they didn't do anything to counter it. So what do you want? I mean, the Democrats, and the question that we have to ask ourselves is, if we reward the Democrats for this behavior because we're afraid of Trump, what won't they do? Because the funny thing about polarization in America, and I hear it all the time, we're so polarized, is the policy narrowing is almost as narrow as it was in the 90s, and yet the rhetoric is hugely different. Now, if you get the more radical vision from Trump, and Trump's second administration is not a repeat of his first, then maybe there are some substantive differences, but we can look at the platforms and we can see that in both the Democratic Party platform and the Republican Party platform, most specific policy agendas were removed. So in the Democratic Party platform, opposition to the death penalty was removed. In the Republican Party platform, there was a total softening of the Second Amendment language and removals of all specific gun policies. So we know that both parties are getting vaguer and more vibes-based. And if we're honest with ourselves, when we ask people who do they think is going to win, they pretty much, what we're learning is their vibes. None of us know. This is a race that is within 2% of each other. It's within a margin of error. If I had to guess, it's off of the Electoral College. It may be Trump, although again, certain events in the last 24 hours tie that up, and there will be lawfare from both sides on this. And I will say this: while the Republican strategy of lawfare is usually to aim towards the absurd, the Democratic strategy of lawfare has been remarkably pathetic. They swung at Trump about 3 times and barely did any damage. And it took them 4 years to do that. So I don't think we know what it's going to mean. But the reason why I'm kind of zen about this is I see the period of the aught teens is over. And we can look at the far left and see that. The far left today looks like the far left of 2006 to 2008.
You mean not relevant?
I do, actually, and totally has no domestic agenda. Just like during the time period when we saw Bernie ascended, it had no foreign agenda and all domestic agenda, because apparently the left can't walk and chew bubblegum at the same fucking time.
Hey, you watch it with your facts. Pascal, Derek Varn, what do you guys say to people that feel, and someone mentioned this in the comments, and I want to get your guys' opinion on this. They're frustrated with the Democrats. And I actually saw this on the show last night. We were talking about, I think the show title was called "There's a Problem with Working Class Men" with Ryan Zagraff. There seems to be this approach. I find it really funny, where you're going to punish the party you don't like with your vote, right? Like, I'm not voting for the Democrats. I'm going to vote for Trump because Kamala Harris sucks. Democrats don't do anything for me. Democrats suck. So I'm going, or you go, I'm going to vote for the Green Party or whatever. I don't care. It doesn't matter as much as people think. Have we kind of fooled ourselves into thinking that the vote is the ultimate power that we have, which is a reason why people don't really understand the idea of organizing workers' movements?
Yes, it's been exalted into the ultimate definition of political activity when it's actually the most base level of political activity.
It's literally the least you can do. Anything less and you're not political, I guess. Like, I mean, it's so epiphenomenal at this point too, because you know, I've heard a lot of people talking about labor. What's labor right now? What's labor right now? Labor is organized labor is what percentage of the population? Last time I checked. Does anyone even know?
Organized
Organized labor.
Oof. It's extremely small, less than 6%.
It's more than that, but it's not a lot more than that. So I believe it's about, if you are looking at organized labor, but you're including the public sector unions, it's something like 16%. The areas of labor growth that we've seen have been like in small shops, or they've been in areas of decline, such as the auto industry, which, by the way, if we actually rationalized our tariffs towards China and let China EVs in, which are pretty good and would be good for the environment, the UAW will probably die.
Oof.
I mean, these are things that you have to look at about why the left feels so powerless. You can tell yourself these stories about it, but labor has not increased as a proportion of population since everyone's been talking about labor mattering. I've come on the show for 4 years and said, if you look at what the Bureau of Labor Statistics says, we do see workers' militancy, but it's not translating into organized labor growth. If you look at what, and the people will say, oh, but there's been this many more applications for you know, small shop unions. And I'm like, yeah, unions that are about 40 people at a time. Right. I mean, like, that's what these small shop applications are for. They're for service sector unions, which are small. And the labor laws in the South, if people want to know where the GOP is actually going, they've always been bad, but they're getting really, really bad, because as soon as the UAW started showing any growth, they changed all the laws on them and it stopped them in their tracks. Which is really easy to do in this country because we're a federated country. And one of my big issues with the internet activist world is people only watch national news. They don't know what's going on locally, which means they're always flat-footed by people who are in power locally, who know their own area. And now that local news is almost all nationalized anyway, since they're all just repeating AI bullshit and whatnot, you pretty much have to be involved to know. So this means a lot of strategies that I hear aren't working. And yeah, I mean, the vote, I'll be honest with you guys. What you guys did with the vote, you guys being us on the left, I'll own it, although I was not even in America and didn't participate in the first Bernie campaign, was to retie, as Pascal said in the beginning, a left that was looking to exit a coalition with the Democratic Party after feeling betrayed by Obama, which, by the way, if we'd have read our history of the New Left and its relationship to the Kennedy and LBJ administrations, we would have seen this shit coming, because it was the exact same shit in the 60s.
Shit, it goes back to the New Deal.
Right. So all this stuff is really interesting to me. Now, there's a lot of people say we don't manufacture things in America. We do. We're the second largest industrial producing society in the country. I mean, in the world, not in the country. That doesn't make any sense. In the world. But let's take this seriously for a second. The proportion of American workers who work in heavy industry is 16% because the extent of automation. So with that in mind, and we have even seen the percentage of GDP coming from direct production go down, which makes me worry about GDP, by the way, that we can't entirely trust it, and it may be more volatile than we actually think, because all that money that people were just dumping into AI that they haven't got any payback on technically increased your GDP. So this is why you've been seeing these big GDP numbers under the Biden administration, and yet you haven't felt it. Now, you haven't felt massive unemployment either, but the employment market's beginning to weaken, partially because of all this investment in AI, not because the AI has been replacing anybody. It actually isn't that efficient, but because so far it's a very expensive product in energy cost. Now, the Democrats have been laying out their whole development thing
on this, and we know this because of the CHIPS Act, right? If we think about this, we got the only things we got the Democrats to do were the Build Back Better Act and the CHIPS Act. And what did they do? They decoupled us from China. And interestingly, the Republicans are saying they're going to undo that, but then like punish China in new ways, which is like a 25% tariff or something. So, regardless, if Trump is serious about having that tariff applied to all trade partners, even Mexico and Canada, there's no way you're not going to see mass inflation. And you might also see a die down of what little industrial gains have been made under the current administration. So, I mean, but what are we going to see under Harris? Harris is talking, getting crypto to black people now after 2022, when we saw the crypto markets go pot up. They've given so much money because they have that kind of cash, because Ponzi schemes often do. They've given so much money to candidates that we now hear candidates talking about crypto when the public has way moved on, because they saw what happened to the crypto exchange bank, and they saw what all those people on the Forbes 30 under study were doing. If you want to know right now, one of the best ways to know if you're going to be in prison for blue collar crimes is to be in Forbes 30 under 30.
You leave Bhaskar out of this. He didn't do anything to deserve that. Pascal, I'm just enjoying Derek Varn's sermon right now. I felt like getting up in church and shouting.
I often do.
All his Southern came out right there too.
Yeah, as I get mad, I get the Georgia comes back.
I was like, damn, man.
We often get the best of Varn here at This Is Revolution.
I think this is the best Varn rant in a minute, man. I watched a good portion of your show. He was good, but he got the what's going on? You got the Holy Ghost going on, Varn? Is that what's going on?
It's me being very mad that, I mean, like, look, when I think about it, the Democrats have made the second most unpopular president in modern American history since we track these things going back to like Truman. All right. They have made that president into more of a cult status than he already was. And even though he has 9 points of unfavorables in all polls, and Walsh and Harris have like one unfavorable, and Walsh has actually got favorable rankings. That it still looks like the Dems are going to lose, because what did they learn from all this time period? They learned we need to reverse all this primary stuff that we did after 68, which, let's go, that's not as democratic as we think it is anyway, but they really want to get their base under control. They don't want a GOP base. They want us all good and compliant. And we might accept an AOC because we can buy her out eventually, but we don't want any Rashida Tlaib's and Ilhan Omar's. And
can we admit for a second, and I hate to break your sermon for a minute, but seriously, can we say that with all the media attention that the quote unquote squad got, because it is kind of a media creation, those women of color, because that wasn't all the freshmen. Right? Yeah, it was, and he just picked the women of color, right? Because Katie Porter was left out of the squad. But anyway, it's interesting to see which one was the black one again? What was her name? Michelle?
Cori Bush or
no, the original ball-headed one?
Oh, the OG squad.
Alyssa. We didn't name all the black names. Michelle, Kendra.
One from Boston.
Yeah, LaRonda. What? The real ineffective one. What is her name? Lashanda.
The one from Boston. I know you're talking about.
I haven't heard anything about her. Rashida Tlaib.
Ayanna Pressley.
Thank you. Jesus, I feel like such a horrible misogynist racist, but oh well. Seeing what happened to Cori Bush and Jamal Bowman for not even being that radical.
No, but they weren't particularly good retail politicians either. And Cori Bush actually alienated her own labor movement, which was a bad idea. By during the Build Back Better and infrastructure bills, wanting a carbon tax, even if there was no offset for working class people, which is part of what alienated her from her labor base. Now, of course, AIPAC wanted to make sure that whoever came in there was going to be way more loyal. But and Cori Bush actually may have won that without AIPAC's influence. Bowman lost pretty bad, though. I mean, I remember I occasionally go in and watch DSA Twitter because I hate myself. And it's like watching MAGA or Twitter or QAnon 2 years ago. And there was this big explosion. Griscom got mad, and everything about like the Bowman and like these Palestinian protesters for Bowman, right? Well, I saw the rally for Bowman that AOC and Bernie both went to. Now, this was still in the Biden period, but Bowman in the greater New York area attracted about 200 people with about 50 counter protesters who were Palestinian. I was like, you guys argued and made it sound like the biggest event in the world in DSA Twitter, and your politician in the greater New York area throws a rally with AOC and Bernie and can't get more than 200 people there? Y'all fucked. Like this whole tempest in a teapot about whether or not we should protest Bowman about his seeming capitulations to Zionism is frankly not even the primary problem. So, it's been crazy to me, and it's crazy to me watching what the remainder of that Bernieite left is doing. All right. I'm seeing people trying to say that if Harris wins, the pro-Palestinian part of the DSA working group, so the people who are the more conciliatory towards the Democrats, should claim victory for pushing the nation left on Palestine and getting Kamala in, which is the most self-delusional thing I think I've ever seen said. Because it was the donors who got Kamala in because they knew that Biden was going to lose. Also, he might not even live that long. And that there is no evidence, none, that Kamala Harris is actually going to do anything to de-escalate what is going on in Gaza. Yes, she has said she wants to work for a ceasefire. So has Joe Biden. And they've been saying that while the entire time they have been sending tons and tons and tons and tons of munitions to Israel. And the one time an activist got Kamala Harris to say, maybe we should consider an arms embargo, within 24 hours, the campaign put a stop on it, which lets you know that Harris was just doing anything to shut the person up in front of her, which if you've actually watched her argue and articulate, you see that a lot. I mean, like I said, she's a slightly more articulate, slightly more charismatic Lori Lightfoot, and that isn't saying much.
I wish I had an organ, like it was church, because there were moments. Vaughn is preaching. Preaching. This is what happens when Pascal has pre-workout and Varn's girl makes grits. Is that what happened this morning? He woke up and he was like, "Oh, you made breakfast? Oh my God, you made grits."
Man, as much as I love grits, they're really kind of hard to get good grits in Utah. I mean, you can get them, but
that's fair. That's fair.
I went to a biscuits and gravy place, Jason, here in Utah.
Okay.
And I'm not making this up. They put quinoa in the fucking grits. White people need to leave certain things alone.
Eric, this is what you say to those people next time that happens.
You having an unnatural allegiance to losers.
You guys start talking to him like Cat Williams. If you go to any restaurant and there's quinoa and the grits, you fucking flip that shit over like an angry cat.
I left.
Good day, sir. Pascal, I know you are Haitian, but did you eat grits growing up?
Yes, I did. My father used to love grits.
Really?
Yes, whenever you went take us fishing, we would go to soul food restaurants and have grits for breakfast.
Oh no shit. So so if someone put quinoa on your grits.
What is quinoa? I don't know what quinoa is. What is that?
Quinoa is a Peruvian high protein grain, which I actually do like, but it needs to stay far fucking away from my grits.
Away from my grits. That's fucked up, man. That's how you get into a fight, actually.
Is it a form of polenta?
No, it's a bunch of tiny little rice seeds, kind of. That's high protein.
It's not something you want in grits. You would be like, what the fuck did you do to these grits? And like, oh, we put quinoa in them.
I love grits. I have grits for breakfast often.
Well, you would pull out a gun and shoot some.
Yeah, I mean, quinoa is pretty great. It's a good grain from Peru, but like it doesn't need to be near grits, and it's also unfortunately a grain that has been gentrified the fuck out of by white people.
Yes.
And you know, I'm not usually here to play the waste card, but like upper middle class white people do not need to gentrify my my grits with their culturally appropriated uses of quinoa.
That's like,
oh, Jason, we forgot to say rest in peace, Quincy Jones.
Quincy Jones passed away, man.
Yes, that's a major loss.
That's a huge loss. A rap album Depot says Buckshot of Black Moon got jumped. Have you heard about that, Pascal?
I did not know that.
You know who Black Moon is, right? Who got the props? Who got the props? That's fucked up. Whitey strikes again, says Bad Luck.
Well, there are people like you can buy quinoa. Like quinoa's been so thoroughly appropriated, everybody eats it now. But yeah, full English breakfast. Oh man.
Oh
so
God, why?
I don't touch
Why?
blood sauces.
It's just if you've been to the UK and you see what the people eat for breakfast, you're like, oh, word. Okay, I'm fine. Give me some more of that dry, unbuttered toast, please.
Haggis.
Oh my! So my first time in Scotland, or second time in Scotland, we got stuck there for 14 days, and we ended up staying with one of the bands we were touring with. They were from Scotland, and they had got a VPN and they were watching American food shows. And they're like, there's this show. I'm not going to try to do the accent. They're like, there's this show. It's called like Man versus Food. And he makes these dishes that they look really good. And I was like, well, whatever he makes, I can make. They're like, well, what is this meatloaf? I was like, oh, I'll make meatloaf. They're like, what is pulled pork? I'll make you all that. So they were fucking with me. I didn't realize that. They're like, we'll make you a fucking Scottish treat. And we'll make you some haggis. And I didn't know what haggis was. I had never heard of it.
Oh, and it's ground lamb and sheep stomach.
I call it like Scottish chitlins.
Yeah, that's about right.
And they fooled me into thinking that the haggis was an actual animal. That is.
I mean, I love that you literally can't buy haggis in America.
Dude, they were so in the house. They lived in this house, and it was one of the band members for the band we were touring with, and his wife's family lived next door. So the wife had called her mom and said, "Mom, there's Americans in our house, and they're going to make us the Man versus Food. And they said, if you buy them the ingredients, they'll make everything." So that was the agreement. So as a joke, they were like, we went next door to the mom's house where they had made haggis. And even that meal was a joke because they served it to us and I was eating it and no one else was eating. And they were like, are you enjoying this? And I'm trying to be nice, like, oh, it's got an interesting flavor. And then they just started laughing and brought real food out.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. A lot of people defending the honor of blood sausage. I have nearly been killed by blood sausage 3 times when I was in Asia. And so since I'm not a weirdo racist, I'm not going to assume that the white version is not going to kill me either. So that's why I don't eat blood sauce. I've heard people some people say that the taste of scabs is great, and
we call them cannibals or vampires.
You don't make. Blood sausage isn't made from human blood, Jason. It's made from pig blood usually. But although in some ways,
I wouldn't trust. Look, if a hot goth chick is handing me a blood sausage, that didn't sound right.
You need it.
That didn't sound right at all. But yes, I would not eat it because I'd be like, "You're a vampire." I'd walk away.
Yeah. I was going to defend the honor of tripa because I like menudo, but I also don't eat pork. So, anyway, it's funny how food discussion is somehow less depressing than discussing anything about this goddamn election.
It should be depressing. You know what's more depressing than the political discussion? The fact the motherfucker put quinoa on the grits.
Well, that's what pretty bad.
Protest.
Yeah. What is that? There's like this old SNL skit from the 80s, and it's like turkey and high C. And so that's what I think of when I think of quinoa and grits. I'm like turkey and high C.
Did you watch the SNL skit that they did recently? I don't watch SNL at all. Just I don't have a TV, first of all. But some of their skits for this election cycle have been kind of funny. Have you seen the one they did on Tim Kaine?
No.
They had a game show called Say My Name. And it was a woman and a man. And the man is supposed to be like this like fucking king liberal man. He's an ally to all women. And you got to vote against Trump. You got to vote for Kamala because she's the only thing that can save us. So the first few questions were like real simple questions, right? And he was winning like $5. And the guy goes, okay, this is the bit. And the guy was bragging about how he was down with Hillary and he's just such a fucking great lib. So literally Tim Kaine walks out. Like not a person dressed like Tim Kaine, but the senator walks out. And the host goes, who's this man? And the guy can't name him. And so he goes, I'll give you a hint. He has the same first name as the current vice president candidate for the Democrats. And the guy was like, Tim Nollins? And so Tim Kaine goes, my name is Tim Kaine. Tim fucking Kaine, right? And he walks out. They ask the guy the next question. He goes, okay, we'll make it up for you. And he starts talking about how he was so down for BLM and all this other shit and all lives matter and yada, yada, yada. And he goes, out of all the black people that were killed in 2020, can you name one? The guy yells out, George Floyd. He goes, besides George Floyd. And the dude can't do it. And he goes, oh, what about Tamika Nollins? And then he goes, no one named Tamika New Orleans got killed. And so then they bring Tim Kaine back out. And they go, what's this guy's name? And the guy goes, ooh. And then Tim Kaine runs up on him and goes, literally, I was just here 90 seconds ago. You don't fucking know my name still. And then they go, and then they said, the guy says his name wrong again. And he goes, you got it wrong. That's Tim Scott. He's like, Tim Scott. And then Tim Kaine loses his shit because he's like, I'm Tim Kaine. But yeah, check out that fucking SNL bit. I couldn't stop laughing because I was like, this is so everyone I see on social media right now.
Hillary Clinton's pro-life VP candidate, and they wonder why she lost.
Yeah. Well, I am wondering if, like, as much as I don't hate Tim Walz, as much as I hate most Democrats, although his Zionism apparently is a little bit depressing, but nonetheless, does it seem like Tim as a vice presidential candidate is a cursed name?
Ooh,
Just saying, like maybe
who else was it, Tim?
I don't know. The only other Tim I can think of lost. So like,
Tim Kaine in the membrane. I thought that for the longest time, I thought that was a Michael Brooks joke. Like he made that up. I didn't know that was a real fucking campaign song in 2016.
Thank you, Lin-Manuel Miranda, ruiner of everything. Except
Do you remember that, Pascal? Tim Kaine on
No.
the membrane.
Tim Kaine was profoundly right-wing, though. A lot of people don't remember that. He was very conservative.
Tim Kaine in the membrane.
He is very conservative, although weirdly, he's like I've heard people say he's actually not terrible on Gaza. But as I've said before, predicting Gaza politics in the Democratic Party is actually really, really hard. Because other stances don't seem to be strongly indicative of much. See everyone's man from Pennsylvania.
Oh, what's that dude's name that everybody was on the board for? And then
No.
The senator, right?
The senator who had a stroke, and
he always be dressed like he about to go hoop, or he's homeless, like a homeless dude that's finna go hoop. A homeless Buddha.
I can literally see his face. And
he about to drop 30 on you.
Yeah, and now I can't remember his name because I need to.
Oh, what is that guy's name? You know what we're talking about, Pascal. Everybody was like, "Oh, he's the left candidate," but a few people that actually were in Pennsylvania was like, "He's
Fetterman."
Fetterman, that's his name. Yeah, Stroke Fetterman.
Guys, thank you, commenters. It was Fetterman.
They called him Stroke Fetterman. Someone's talking about Chris Catrone is endorsing Kamala Harris.
I saw a video.
Chris Catrone likes to upset people in his nominations. I don't know. I mean, I think Catrone is. I have a question, actually, to tie it back to the thing of the show, maybe to be sad for a little while. Are we going to see Trump derangement system part 2, or is everyone too exhausted for that? Like, I really don't know.
You know, one part of Kamala's campaign, which I think is interesting, is this is the end. Once we win, he's over. And there's a reality to that because just the man's really old, first of all. And he does seem to be kind of having a bit of a cognitive decline as well.
He's also going to be up for sentencing on the 26th.
I mean, you really think anything's going to happen?
I have no idea. Probably not, but who knows?
I mean, I thought that was an interesting way, because when people in this world talk about voting strategies, it's like they've never talked to real people, like the shit they say.
By this world, do you mean leftist, or do you mean online, or do you like, what do we mean here? Which world?
A little bit of everything, okay. in the gumbo pot, if you will.
Okay.
The gumbo pot of fuckery. It's like when you talk to people and you see what people are worked up about, it's nothing that you say. Nothing that you say. So, even when you go to like rural areas that have been devastated, if they talk about politics at all, they're probably pretty apathetic and apolitical.
Yeah, I mean,
or if they're like this much hopeful, it's like someone needs to come in here and fix this. It's like, well, what does that mean? And why do you want someone to just fix it? Like, is it that easy? Has anyone ever fixed it?
I mean, people have done better industrial policy than we've done, which is basically none for for the last since Clinton. But I mean, the Democrats tried to do some industrial policy, but they fucked it up. And let's be quite frank, like our Constitution is at war with our Constitution, and that the federal system that it's set up is really fragmenting at the moment because it was held together with Supreme Court rulings from the 60s and norms, which just means we play along to ignore that we have a problem. And that shit's over. That really is over. Like, I don't even think the Democrat. I mean, everyone's like, oh, the Democrats won't do anything, you know, like that. They've like them putting pressure on a lot of Silicon Valley to censor for them. Really seems to have turned Silicon Valley against them, and we've really seen it. Plus their tax policy, and we've really seen this in the fact that we saw, you know, a lot of these tech owners who were good progressives who are newspapers like the Washington Post and the LA Times, put stamps on their good liberal editorial panels and telling them they couldn't endorse anyone. Which yes did lead to massive defections in readership, although it's not like, I mean, I don't know. I mean, like, it's funny because I'm like, are the newspapers making money now anyway? But
it's been dead for some time.
But it's interesting to see that come out because it does seem like there's a lot of resentment in that world, and it's not all the obvious teal Elon Musk level resentment where people are gonna endorse Trump or get on that train. But I mean, I kind of think we're watching Bezos and Zuck break bad, and that they're not pretending to be progressives anymore. So that will be interesting where that goes. But also, I mean, if Trump derangement system comes back, I know a lot of people think it's going to come back hard. I actually don't. I don't see it. Young people are not nearly invested in the same thing.
No.
Yes,
they're invested in getting the bag.
Right.
They're invested in getting the bag way more than they were invested in healthcare 8 years ago. So.
Well, let's also be quite frank about the healthcare situation. Like, the American healthcare system and the American school system are both literally failing in front of our fucking eyes. And I can't get most even Democrats to talk honestly about it. And the reason why is that it is very clear that a large part of their donor base are tied into the people who run and administer hospitals. And if we're honest about that, they're the same fucking people who run the universities. What is the Ivy League universities' main sources of revenue? It's their endowment, which usually means they're the largest landlord in the cities that they're in, and it's their hospitals, which is a good way for them to rent seek for federal money. And so, do you think the Democrats are going to turn on their most loyal constituency, the educational apparatus that's also probably a financial industrial complex more than it is an educational apparatus at this point? No, they're not going to do that. That's who fucking gives them their money. So, like that, and the left, I hate to tell people this about the left, but Christopher Lasch called this shit about the left in the 60s. We often huff fumes off of Democrats' hopes and failures. Most of us here came here because of Obama. Like, let's be honest. All right. Two things radicalized most of us: Obama and 2007. We're trying to forget that 2020 even happened. You write a book about BLM right now, no one's going to buy it.
No one gives a fuck. No one gives a fuck about Me Too. No one gives a fuck. Look, no one cares. This is going to sound fucked up. No one gives a fuck about colored chicks, and no one gives a fuck about niggas. If you didn't get your fucking George Floyd money in 2020, I feel sorry for you because your moment is fucking done. Done, and more done. Sorry. It's just over. I should say poor colored chicks.
I mean, here's the thing, though. we have to kind of admit that whatever you can say about Adolf Reed's politics, he did call this, that was co-opted into an elite politics, not once, but twice.
Mhm.
It was co-opted into an elite politics at the end of the Obama administration, during BLM 1, and it was co-opted into an elite politics during BLM 2. And we can't even get the left to be honest about how much grifting, and I don't mean grifting in like this media person's a grifter. I mean literal scams.
Literal scam. No, yeah.
That happened around BLM. Like, they just want to make it go away. No learning from the strategy failures. No trying to figure out why a real movement, probably the largest real movement we've seen since, I don't know, actually, went up in smoke in a year.
But that's the thing. It didn't, though. Because the cats that are still, I'm BLM LA, especially that's the chick that's that's the woman that's running with Cornel West, right? She's still part of it. They're still getting donation dollars somewhere. I agree with you. It went up in smoke in the sense that whatever it was supposed to do, and it got people mobilized. What happened to that mobilization? And I think that's what you mean by the smoke, right?
Yeah, I mean, hustle. It was always a hustle. I
mean, we got a enriched black leadership class out of it. Sure.
That's what I said. If you didn't get 2020 was a watershed year. And if you look at the amount of money that went out to start these foundations and who had a goofy fucking art project or a Kindy-like book, all that shit gets funded. You had Cedric Johnson come on here and say, I don't get to be on people's doctorate committees. Same thing with Toure.
That shit's gonna last in education for a while, but we also have to be quite honest about it in the American higher education system at the moment, because men in general are not going. I know this for a fact. I'm a high school techer. I used to teach seniors until
we were talking about it yesterday. We were talking about it yesterday.
They're not going. They're not going at all. In fact,
but that was the trade, Derek. The trade was like, I can give you niggas crypto, and who gives a fuck where you go? But these black chicks are literally going to school. They're getting degrees. We can indoctrinate them into the PMC, and they're going to be good democratic soldiers, because the biggest fear is the control of your body. That's been the talk about abortion since the 80s.
Which is also why we're not going to see any action on abortion in any meaningful
because you
way.
have the neoliberal solution. It's about choice.
Right.
If it's not about healthcare and family planning, then it's a choice.
We have to think about what the Supreme Court did. The Supreme Court with Dobbs actually gave both sides the ability to continue to mobilize around abortion.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's not as motivating for the right anymore, because, the right's usually in the places where it's going to be restricted. And there's large steps of overreach. See Alabama on IDF, etc. On IVF, not IDF. That's getting old. And fertilization, etc., etc. But the states' rights argument has been a long argument, and we see progressives pick up this shit. You're from California. You hear Californians talk about, like, we need to do Medicare for all on a state-to-state level. I can't think of anything stupider for 3 reasons. 1, capital flight is real in states in a way that it isn't at the national level, although it's still pretty real in the national level too, but it's way more real in states. California is a big enough state to kind of offset it, but most states cannot. 2, states don't have currency sovereignty, and most of them have to eventually balance their budgets, which means that the cost is a lot higher than at the federal level. And 3, the whole point of having a single payer is that it's mass enough to force good concessions from medical providers, which on a state-to-state level, if you're not California or New York, you can't do it. Even California and New York are going to have a hard time doing it at any scale. So this like left federalism bullshit, some of the weirdest turns I've ever seen, because it's just like, California is not even California. So like, what do you think? I don't know. Connecticut's gonna do, or or Wisconsin. I mean, those are like, so it's just, these things are crazy to me. But in 2021, we were having city councils literally talk about give millions of dollars of reparations to individual Black people in like the Bay Area, which we all knew wasn't going to happen. But the fact that they would even play at that shit was
But what happened?
discrediting.
We talked about that, right? That was on the text thread that we have, Pascal. Then who got paid? Somebody got paid to sit there and do that research, right? When you sit around here and go, white supremacy, white supremacy, white supremacy, white supremacy, and you start writing books about white supremacy, white supremacy, white supremacy, white supremacy, guess what you fucking fuck around and get? You get that call. Hey, Gavin Newsom's got this fucking commission, and you can get a grant where you can sit around for a year and write papers about reparations. And then we can come up with a proposal, and nothing's going to happen.
I mean, we have seen,
we're on that panel where we can get paid a lot more to speak. We're going to get published in much better publishing houses, no more academic presses. We can get that Simon and Schuster money. We can get on CBS Morning, and we won't bring up the Palestine thing. We can just talk about white supremacy, white supremacy, white supremacy.
Right, which has very little purchase even in communities of color these days. I mean, not that communities of color don't believe in white supremacy, but that particular mode of talking about it has less and less purchase. But I promise you, academia is insulated. It's insulated from its own failure. Like, one of the things that I want to point out about like academia's failure on education almost entirely is that its money sources isn't from its these undergrad programs don't matter. They're largely trying to pull people in from foreign countries because they can charge them more money, and then also look progressive because they can say that they're more diverse, even though their economic diversity has gone through the toilet. Which also, by the way, means that working class Black people aren't benefiting from all this shit at all, which we kind of all know, but no one will admit. So when we see that, what do we see? We don't see movement on anything. Even the bribes. Okay, let's talk about a bribe that the Biden administration did around student loans, which was to throw them into chaos. All right. Now, I'm just going to say this is not my policy. This is not what I would ideally do. But if I was a politician, I would say, I'm going to forgive all the interest and be done. Right? Pay back what you owe. A lot of people have already paid that. And we're going to do it forever. And then we'll try to figure out a way to revamp the program. They didn't do that. They threw a forgiveness policy that was kind of obvious that it was going to get pushback. And particularly because there are these state-sponsored, federalized private corporations created by states like Pennsylvania and Missouri to oversee student loans, which also became the ones that the federal government relied to administer its student loan program off of its 2007 reforms after they were all neoliberalized in the 2000s, which also, by the way, tied a lot of people up in some weird knots. I was one of them. And now you have all these laws that are court decisions that are just tying these things up forever. So no one knows even what their payments are. So you have other chaos. It would have been better if the Biden administration did almost nothing except actually deliver on actually existing legislation, which now they're having trouble even doing because they've tied that up into their weird executive orders. So, for example, everybody on IBR who got moved automatically to the SAVE plan, whether they wanted to or not, is now frozen, not having any idea what's going to happen based on the election. And of course they tied it up with the fucking election because they're hoping it's going to motivate people to vote. Right? This is turning every single part of American life into some way of hoping to get you to vote with no solution on offer ever, even where there are fairly easy and obvious ones. Like, we're not even in neoliberalism in the same way anymore. Neoliberalism was way more fucking coherent than this. This is all the bad of neoliberalism, but with random government shit going on all the time because it doesn't seem clear that there's enough natural profit rates. I mean, there's plenty of profits, but how many of these people had to like suck on the government tit for 20 years to get them? All the tech things did. I mean, most of those tech things weren't profitable for the first 15 years. So they survived off of government contracts, and off of those government contracts making venture capital look appealing. They got nothing. And what has the left done? Like, remember I said I don't feel like we can walk into bubblegum at the same time, but every single domestic issue, like, I don't think the domestic issues are more important, by the way, than Palestine or foreign policy, but they are important. Mm-hmm. But every single domestic issue, the left, at least the left that wants anything to do with electoralism at all, I mean, I'm not even talking about people in the Democrats, has pretty much defected. You know, and we're back. I mean, like, literally on the third party circuit. Okay. None of us were talking about Jill Stein. This is how far we've regressed. That the only viable alternative was to go back to the same alternative that's been tried with the Green Party 4 other times. Because the Green Party does look like it might be able to eke out 5%. Maybe. Although I'd like to tell you, even if the stats on everything is correct about the Muslim vote, you're still only looking at 3 or 4% there. So maybe they do. I mean, I'm not here to I'm not here to shit on the Green Party. I'm just saying it's interesting that we didn't go there until literally a month ago because we exhausted all of our other options. Like, that's where we're at. Everybody, a year ago, people were trying, maybe the left should go for RFK. Maybe they should go for Cornel West. No, we're back to replaying the past. We're trying to literally forget most of the team. We're not just trying to forget the lead up in the pandemic in 2020. We're trying to forget like the last 10 years.
Well, that's what I was saying about that idea of like your revolutionary action is going to be your vote, and people feeling very what's the word I'm looking for? It's almost, what do you say?
Satiated?
I don't know if that's the word I'm looking for. There's this attitude, I'm going to vote for Cornel West. It's like, okay, that's cool. And then what? Like, really? And then what? Give a fuck?
Yeah. And for those of people who think this is just an American problem, and I want to actually put emphasis on this, de-democratization has also played a role where all around the world, there is now an incumbent disadvantage because my brothers and whatever the fuck you are, you are not an island in your own country. And the larger trends are cutting in other directions. We're not the only country moving right at all. We're not the only country where everyone seems dissatisfied with establishment politicians and yet has no real alternative basis for them. Look at Keir Starmer. Keir Starmer, Labor won in a landslide with less support than Corbyn lost with, not because they were a protest vote. And because everything else was so divided that they were the last dog standing in a lot of cases, right? And they're not doing anything. Britain is still seemingly wanting to become white Argentina, while Argentina seems to want to become, I don't know, the abyss or whatever, because we all see how that's going too. Most of the red waves have been defeated.
Yep.
I mean, worldwide, people, we've heard all this stuff about, we have all these authoritarian leaders like Putin and Xi. I mean, I'm going to bracket that out for a second, okay? But like, that could be true. That cannot be true. That's beyond the scope of what I'm talking about right here. We've seen de-democratization across the board everywhere. Macron, Francois Baud should have been able to form a government. They could not. Macron even reached out to Le Pen. The whole reason that Macron ever came to power in the first place was to stop the ascension of the French white, and he's made a coalition government with them. So if you don't see how things are moving, because it's not just your left that's failed. People, this is just America. America doesn't have a left. No, I will admit, like the DSA is 55K right now, down from its 90-something K in 2020. So they've lost 40,000 people in 4 years. And France on bout is 600K, okay, of cadres. So there is a massive difference, but nowhere in the quote democratic world, whatever the fuck that means at this point, is the left seemingly doing that well, unless they came to power a long time ago, with the kind of exception of Brazil. But Lula's coalition is
very different.
It's very different.
That's why it's so quiet over there.
And Mexico is also kind of different.
Very different in Mexico.
But there's also tensions between the Latin left governments. See the tensions between Lula and Maduro. All right. There are strong tensions there. So we have to ask ourselves, why did this go so poorly? Not just here, but as a worldwide movement. All right. Because I'm going to tell you what if Britain is a sign of our future, the left in America, as we knew it from the 2010s, has self-liquidating again, like they did in the 80s. And so regardless of who wins this election, we're going to be in a much more right-wing movement. And when people talk about fascism, that seems to me to be hope that the left would matter, because liberals tend to support fascists to fight leftists. They don't need to.
Thank you. Thank you. Where's the organ? Derek Vaughn. You made Pascal be quiet. I want to read you guys some of these comments that people have left. Let's see here. More tariffs on China, says M. Toussaint. I'm assuming she's saying that in her Donald Trump voice. Tony says foreign policy shift of Cold War 2.0 from Russia to China. If Trump wins, more escalation with Russia if Harris wins. Do you guys agree with that?
I don't know. It's hard to see. Actually, one good question that I don't think anyone's asked is what the Democratic Party's policy is going to be on China. We kind of know what Trump's is, but Democrats have been almost as hostile this entire time. They've normalized Trump's tariffs on China. Have done a lot of stuff in that regard. So we have to ask ourselves, what do they even mean? I mean, so on China, I don't know. There's BRICS is growing pretty quickly, but there's also a lot of internal tensions in BRICS because right now, for example, India it's finally going through its massive industrialization period in some ways after it's even technological fight. And I know that sounds insulting, but it's kind of true because we're seeing early industrial levels of GDP growth, which is like 8-9%. China, of course, beat that during its GDP growth period, but I mean, India has not seen that in a long or ever. So at least since we've had that kind of stats. So India's up and coming. There have been some normalizations of India-China border relations, but that's a volatile thing where what keeps India and China from really going at each other is Russia, because India has good relations with Russia. China does not have good relations with India. And the U.S. has been leveraging that as a way to leverage something within the BRICS coalition for a long time, and they're still doing it. So where does that all leave us? Well, one of the things that I've been asking people what they really want to talk about when we talk about like a multipolar world is that there are détentes. I mean, in fact, a lot of people should want them. They're détentes for these different great powers, right? And it seems like Trump wants to realign that chessboard somehow, and the Harris administration doesn't. if we take Trump to be channeling the spirit of Mearsheimer, which I don't know if we should or shouldn't because he's not been that consistent in the past, but maybe he is. There is a pivoting towards hostility with China, although the Mearsheimer stance priorly that it should be open warfare that he used to even promote in Australia 2 years ago has really softened. So maybe they're hoping to realign that chessboard. I have no idea if that would be successful. I suspect not, but I really don't know because I'm not going to pretend to read the minds of the foreign policy thinkers in all these countries, particularly when a lot of this is now like state secret. But what we can see is that we still haven't seen the Belt and Road Initiative really kick back up. Chinese growth is not terrible, but it's not great. They're not hitting their growth goals, and their youth unemployment's really high. So they're going to have to pivot somewhere. Russia has seen massive development. It's developed its internal domestic production economy for the first time since the end of the Soviet Union, and quit being such an extractive economy, although it is because of that adjustment and because it's relatively encapsulated, having the problems that encapsulated societies do, which is productivity in a closed system will lead to inflation. Sorry, MMTers. But we have that. We have documentation of that in the current Russian situation. So when we look at that on the world stage, there's a lot of places for people to move right now. How should we feel about that? And what should we want? I mean, the thing is, geopolitically, it's clear to me that we're not going to benefit from a Harris administration, and I don't know that we're going to benefit from a Trump administration. It might slightly tick down the possibility of nuclear war. So, I mean, that's not nothing. But to be fair, Ukraine is kind of in such rough shape now that that's not really a threat in the same way anymore either. And it seems like NATO barely cares. And people go, oh, will the other powers step in? I don't see a lot of evidence that France or Germany or Britain are really willing to risk the political capital they were even willing to risk 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
This stuff is not popular. Poland's going to always be, Poland's going to be Poland. I wish Dr. Cuba was here to talk more about that. But, I don't see how any of this plays out in a peace direction. Although there is maybe more room there with Trump, but I don't know. But with Gaza, definitely, who knows? I don't think there's not a lot of places for anything to go. So, that's going to have to come from outside the United States, or it's just going to have to get too costly, or it's going to have, because the level of brutality isn't going to do it.
Yeah.
It's something else.
Pascal got me pining for Ralph Nader, says PMC. Kushlik says, so literally there can be no good outcome. That's how I'd stack the cards as an evil angel trying to make it all awful as possible.
Yeah, it feels that way.
Kuba says, mostly agree with Kuba. Sweeter words have never been uttered.
He doesn't get that a lot from me.
Isaac says Trump doesn't want a war with Iran. Sorry, I'm saying Iran.
I don't know. I wish I thought that was true. I don't know.
Prairie Fire says, might be speaking out of line, but as someone who works a physically demanding job, if they support Hispanics, there won't be a population of workers I'd consider my equal left. I'm an enigma. Okay. LPA Films. Yep, many black and brown voters want deportations outside of conservatives. That is very, very true. That migrant caravan was a strategic move, and we'll see if it bears fruit. Remember when Dems were trying to out Trump on immigration? That was fast. Nuri Yank, who always has good things to say. My issue with a lot of the leftists media is that they just ignore that this lesser of two evil voting has got us to this point, but still want to defend it by voter shaming and doing DNC propaganda. I could see where you would say that.
I'm going to sound like Benjamin Studebaker, but the electoral road for now is closed. If you want to open it again, you're going to have to do other kinds of work.
I was going to make a dirty joke. I think people want deportations. Thinking of it, it'll force companies to raise wages and hire them. That's what people think. That is not smart for people to think that. But I also saw a video today of a guy that didn't understand how tariffs work. He thought tariffs made things cheaper. I thought that was funny. I'm fine with whoever wins as long as they bring back freedom fries. It's a great comment. I love Kamala campaigning with a pro-life Republican. LOL. Go feminism. Oh, that's from Lady Braga. Liz Cheney. Is she still out there with Liz Cheney?
Yeah, the Cheney, the neocon DNC union tour has been like the weirdest thing that we went from democracy is joy, which by the way was Harris stealing a card from Syriza. I want to remind you how it worked out for Syriza, but nonetheless, that they were doing that to let's do a tour with the Cheneys, and literally the most ghoulish people I can imagine. Yeah, I dislike Cheney more than I dislike Trump. I'm going to be quite honest.
Oof. Personally, I think we might be at a 2008 level of farmer support for Democrats in the Midwest. I just don't think they're very vocal because farmers are outnumbered in the countryside 2-1 now. I can believe that. I did see some Kamala Harris signs on my drive up. Not many, but I did see a few. Okay, Harris means efficient, cold neoliberalism at home and neoconservatism abroad. The Democrats are the competent party of empire.
Say it again for the people in the back.
That's a good one. Pierre Mew Mew. That's a funny name. Obama destroyed the passion for something leftist in America. That emotion and passion to get out is gone. Not saying he was leftist, but he was sold as that. He was sold as that. He was not.
I have a lot more passion now, but that's because I'm a lot more pissed off.
That's fair. That's fair. And it would be a better show if I had an organ. So next time you come on, maybe I'll try to hook up the MIDI controller and get like an organ sound. So whenever you go off on a sermon, we can get Pascal shouting in the aisles. Bernie was what was pulling Democrats to the left. I'm surprised how fast that momentum dissipated right back to ID politics and neoliberalism now.
That was intentional.
By Bernie Sanders?
To capitulate to the left because you didn't want to get tagged with aiding Trump.
Yep.
To capitulate to Democrats.
Oh, okay.
It wasn't like a conspiracy, but he did not want to get blamed for. He didn't want to be
Ralph Nader.
Ralph Nader or Jill Stein. He didn't want that on it. He didn't want that on his memory, so he capitulated.
That's understandable to a degree, but I get it. Cuba says, when I was still in DC, the immigration or RFPs out were all looking for support to make the system harsher and more exploitive. Yep. It's pretty rough right now. Abortion is not a social issue. It's a healthcare issue. The government sets regulations on healthcare, such as you can't be denied entry to an ER if you have no health insurance.
Yep, and you can't be denied service, but what service you get, however, is an entirely different thing. However, good luck on so the idea that social issues and medical issues are separate is kind of funny.
I'm a black man in Chicago, and because of the Dems not actually doing something for the poor, working class Black and Latino community, this has caused huge animosity between both. Illinois red soon.
I've seen that here in Salt Lake City too.
Well, I again, black men are no longer something the Democratic Party gives a shit about, and they have black women.
And Latin men are the same. I mean,
yeah, Latin men are the same too. Hey, fellas, Dodgers win. Nobody cares. Don't forget that most Dems, including OC and Biden, ran into the arms of Vichy Republicans who deny railroad workers their right to strike.
I haven't forgotten.
This is why the left needs to organize its own backyard first. If you can't do that, then why pretend you can take on the nation?
Yeah, I have to agree with that sentiment. I've actually thought a lot about how we went from like there is no left to we're going to win the presidency in 2 years. It's kind of crazy to think about that.
Remember when everybody was like AOC 2028 AOC?
Yes, I do remember that. And I remember vomiting in my mouth.
Thank you for the super chat, Strom McCallum. Chris Catrone, Reed Kane. I don't know who Reed Kane is, but I know Sutter Kane.
Socialist Legacy.
Okay,
that's who Reed Kane is.
Gotcha. Chris Catrone, Sutter Kane, and tell Chris Catrone I said that, and I bet you.
In fact, I think I'm appearing on a post-election show, which will be my last appearance on one of these shows for a while.
With Catrone?
I am doing an interview with Catrone because everyone begged me to do it, and because I like Chris enough. I'm doing a show on Antifada where I think Reed Kane will be representing his positions. I'm not sure. He was invited to. So.
Oh wow. Biden's industrial policy is a bad joke. Please don't forget that joke for Chris Catrone. Chris Catrone, Sutter Kane, 2024. Sutter Kane. Do you need Sutter Kane? Only the real horror homies will know who that is. Drunk Dalek, who is Jeremy Salmon, that helps us out with movie night. So shout out to fucking Jeremy. And shout out to Jeremy. This is Revolution. Can you talk about how fear and anxiety pitches don't actually motivate non-reactionaries and in fact will exhaust everybody? Pascal.
Here's the thing. Every poll indicates that the democracy is ending has the most negative effect on the Democratic voting populace. So that them doubling down on that strategy is weird because all the polls indicate that it doesn't work, but I guess that's all they got. Also,
this comment for me is the best one of the night. George Floyd died so that the court tellers could open up an investment account.
Oh, God. That's painful.
That's Pascal. What say you to that comment?
Chef's kiss to that one.
I feel like someone just stabbed me in the gut.
Joe Biden's public option was more popular than Medicare for all and would be a quicker, easier path to national health insurance. Remember that one from 2020?
I do. Sadly,
I forgot about that. Yeah. Where are we? Raider fan. I think this says Raider fan. We have seen the limits of identity politics. Post-colonialism often obfuscates modern imperialism through trauma-induced mythologies of the past.
I thought we should. I used to think that too, but then they came up with Kamala Harris.
When that happened, I was shocked. But, I've been predicting that Kamala can win. And if I'm right, a lot of people owe me fast food. I just want that thrown out there for the people that are watching the show that know they owe me fast food.
I didn't take any bets on this one.
Because you knew. Because you ain't fucking stupid. All the motherfuckers is like, you don't know. Okay. But if I'm right, motherfucker. And don't use the app either. Pay the full fucking price. White supremacy was literally the only thing activists cared about. Oh, and I guess giving needles to homeless people without having any plans to fix the issues that make working people uncomfortable. Oof. That was another one.
I still snarky audience tonight.
A lot of people are rightly, but I mean, do you remember when the left was always talking about all the homeless people? It's not like they went a fucking way.
No, nobody gives. Look,
well, I don't hear any of that shit anymore.
No, I got to step over you when I'm at my protest for something. Fuck out of my way. Thank you guys for hanging out with us. We will not be on Tuesday because you guys got to go vote. And there's going to be a million shows on that are going to do all the voting shit that you want to see. And I didn't want to compete with it. And I'm glad we were able to do this show. I'm sad that Gene and Kuba weren't here. But I feel like I still had squad. We had Pastor Varn. From now on, whenever you come on TIR, you are Pastor Varn. Is that fair?
Reverend Vaughn.
Reverend Vaughn to the pool pit.
It's funny. The one, me who has literally no relationship to Protestantism whatsoever, except a mild bias against it, becomes Reverend Vaughn. That's pretty funny. Just guess I've been listening to the Black Church for a lot.
In my mind now, I have a picture of Derek growing up in Macon, Georgia, just like sitting outside of the black church, dancing and shit.
My next door neighbor was a black pastor. True story. So like I heard that stuff a lot.
I'm sure you had a few trips to the church.
Way more interesting than white Protestant churches.
As a kid that grew up in a black Kojic church and that married these Catholics, I was like, how do you guys sit through this? No one's gonna dance at all.
Well, just a white Baptist church is just as boring, but with more shame and not even the fun calisthenics and robes. So, and wine. There's no wine either. Maybe there's snakes though. Sometimes there's snakes.
Have you ever been to a mega church?
I have been to one. Yes.
That shit blows my mind. That shit. I've been to. I call it a mega church because it's big as shit. And yeah, those blow my mind. They're not as fun. They're just kind of, it's like going to a big amusement park like Disneyland. And black church to me is like going to the neighborhood fair. Pascal, did you grow up in one of those churches where they shout in aisles, or you went to the Catholic church, didn't you?
Well, my mom was Protestant, my dad was Catholic, but I went to Catholic churches most of the time.
Somebody just commented, "We take drugs, Jason." Thank you guys so fucking much. Let me know what church you guys go to, and are you used to shouting in the aisles? And were there moments where when Varn went off, you felt like shouting in the aisles? I think he killed it, and I think he deserves this one.
Here it comes! Woo!
Thank you guys. I'll be back Wednesday for the Red Zone. But again, have fun voting. Definitely take pictures with that dumb fucking sticker and put it all over social media so everybody can know that you're a better person than the person that doesn't have that sticker or that picture on social media.
All 80% of the public is going to vote. So
exactly.
I guess gloat over that 20% that doesn't.
You go ahead and gloat, and you know what? And then chase that gloating with a Starbucks beverage. There you go.
Yeah.
So have a very good night. Thank you guys. And we are out.